In January 2020, the baby, whose real name is Jonathan Kirk, was scheduled to perform at a Miami nightclub. However, when the club owner paid him only $20,000 out of the owed $30,000, the situation quickly escalated. The victim claimed that Kirk physically assaulted him, repeatedly punching him in the face, and was subsequently attacked by other members of Kirk's entourage. He was physically assaulted, knocked to the ground, and robbed of his phone, credit card, and $80 in cash. The only available evidence of this incident was a blurry piece of CCTV footage. Kirk fled the scene in a black SUV, but returned to the hotel a few hours later, where he was confronted by both victims and a group of police officers waiting to arrest him.
Okay, what's going to happen was you're being detained, okay? And we're going to be, right now we have victims that have made allegations towards you.
Saying what? What allegations? I can help y'all out right now. I can make y'all's job a whole lot easier.
You've been positively identified and strong amount.
And unless y'all do what y'all do. Be careful with my thumb. It's broken. Be careful with my thumb. You see my skull? Be careful. Film them. Film.
He was taken to the police station and informed that he was there as part of an investigation. However, the investigation turned out to be far from straightforward. To the frustration of the police officers, Kirk made their job difficult during his time in the interrogation room. It was immediately clear that this case would pose challenges for the detectives. Kirk began by refusing to answer any questions from the officers, even basic ones like confirming his name. Despite being informed of his Miranda rights, which include the right to remain silent, it appeared that Kirk was opting to exercise that right. Interestingly though, he chose to forego his rights to have a lawyer present, not because he couldn't afford one. Typically, the recommended course of action in such a situation is to remain silent and request legal representation. However, Kirk seemed confident that he could navigate the situation on his own, as long as he carefully chose his words.
In front of the hotel in your SUV?
No.
They did?
No.
Okay.
Somebody bring $20,000 that wasn't theirs and lied to them and told them that it was for an event of theirs on the 31st.
Kirk maintains that he had no involvement in the events that transpired outside the nightclub. His narrative, although somewhat unclear, essentially asserts that his manager was negotiating a performance at Cafe Iguana Pines with an event promoter. However, it came to light that the money offered was illicit, and the promoter's behavior raised suspicions during the deal. Rather than proceeding with a shady deal, Kirk decided to disengage, urging them to resolve their issue, and departed without confrontation. This explanation, however, doesn't account for the physical altercation outside the club that was clearly captured on video. Nevertheless, given the ambiguous footage and the absence of witnesses to identify the assailants, as long as Kirk maintains his version of events, it theoretically could work in his favor. When it might appear that Kirk is flaunting his wealth, he makes a valid point in this situation. Why would someone engage in substantial business dealings for tens of thousands of dollars on a regular basis be interested in an iPhone and $80? The farther he can distance himself from the incident, both in terms of physical presence and involvement, the better his defense. From Kirk's perspective, he had no motive to commit the crime, and his alibi was plausible and reasonable. However, from the detective's standpoint, a crime occurred, and Kirk's vehicle was in close proximity to it. Consequently, their objective is to gather information that would construct a timeline of Kirk's day and craft a narrative that leaves him no option but to confess. Even without legal representation, Kirk is well aware of the best course of action. He currently holds the upper hand in the interrogation and should strive to maintain it. The police are seeking any evidence that links Kirk to the crime scene, but by steering the conversation away from that and redirecting it toward what he deems as more significant topics, there's little chance they'll obtain the information they require. It is indeed peculiar that Kirk hasn't requested a lawyer, especially considering his evident knowledge of how interrogations work. In most situations, seeking legal counsel rarely harms a case, and it's typically recommended to safeguard one's rights. Whether it's a matter of ego or a lapse in judgment, Kirk is currently in control of the interrogation, but it seems he's about to take even more control. In this particular scenario, it holds true that if you find yourself in an interrogation room and the police are trying to extract information or accusing you of a crime without immediately charging you, it often indicates that they lack the necessary evidence for a straightforward conviction. In most cases, interrogations are conducted to obtain confessions when the evidence is insufficient. There are a few exceptions, such as attempting to understand the motives behind a crime, but it's usually clear why you're there based on your knowledge of the incident and the questions being posed. If the police can't prove your guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, remaining silent and requesting a lawyer, especially if you're innocent, is typically the wisest course of action. As the detectives recognize that they're not making any headway with Kirk for now, and he has firmly established his version of events, they follow the standard protocol and leave the room to deliberate on their next steps. This approach is often used to give the suspect time alone in the room, potentially causing anxiety to build up, which might lead to a breakthrough. However, in this case, Kirk chooses an unconventional route and simply shuts his eyes and goes to sleep. It's apparent that he remains unfazed by the situation. It appears that the detectives were unable to devise a successful strategy to make Kirk cooperate, and they recognized that he was resolute in his stance. When a detective returned, it was to address the matter of Kirk's belongings left in his hotel room. Despite not being convicted yet, Kirk was the primary suspect in the ongoing investigation. Consequently, he would spend some time in jail while the authorities gathered evidence and determined their course of action. During this time, they needed to decide what to do with his personal items. However, Kirk adamantly refused to allow them to handle his belongings and insisted that the hotel should manage them. Facing the potential of a 15-year prison sentence, a $10,000 fine, and additional charges related to the battery incident, the authorities needed to accumulate sufficient evidence. Yet, obtaining this evidence was proving to be challenging, given Kirk's lack of cooperation and the limited information from the obscured security footage, which was the primary evidence indicating the crime had occurred. After spending 48 hours in jail, Da Baby was released, and charges against him were dropped just 2 months later, allowing him to regain his freedom.